Hello, Past Commodore Joe Tringali, Academy of Yachting, coming to you today from the beautiful area of Harbor Point, North Palm Beach, Florida. You can see that I'm surrounded by some very nice boats, and there's a lesson to be learned here. In fact, there are a number of lessons to be learned. We are here, my wife and I are having dinner with our daughter and her husband. So I guess the first lesson is have a smart daughter. And the second lesson is if you're going to spend time in school after getting your 4-year degree, go to medical school and not to law school. Anyway, those are not the lessons we're going to talk about today. I'm going to tell you about a case that I handled when I was an assistant attorney general. And although the law is quite simple, I think the lesson to be learned, the takeaway, is something that you need to consider. So please listen carefully. The case involved a privately owned vessel, a gambling boat. We'll call her the Lucky Lady. And she was berthed behind a bar in Fort Lauderdale. We'll call the bar the Jolly Roger. How's that? The captain of this vessel was, we'll call him Captain Jones. And his name is Fred Jones, just so that you don't mix him up with John Paul Jones, okay? So there we have Fred Jones, Lucky Lady, Jolly Roger bar. Now, Fred Jones' job was to be master of the Lucky Lady and take her out every day, every evening actually, out past the 3-mile limit where the craps table would be opened and the slot machines unlocked and the blackjack tables open, and people would gamble out past the 3-mile limit. And Captain Jones' job was to keep the boat safe out there, circling around out in international waters until all the guests lost a sufficient amount of money, and then he would bring them back to the Jolly Roger, tie the boat up for the night, and the next day do the same thing. The other person involved in this story is a brand new Marine Patrol officer. Shiny badge, new leather belt, the whole works, who noticed that the Lucky Lady did not have a Florida registration certificate, did not have one of those Florida stickers. I'm not going to show them to you here because they are on other people's boats, but anyway, you know what it looks like. So he stopped the vessel and boarded her and asked to see the registration documents, and Captain Fred Jones said, "Ain't got none. Not my boat. I just work here." And so the officer gave him a warning and said, "Next time, make sure this boat is registered in Florida." Well, Captain Jones sent that message on to corporate headquarters at the state capitol in Tallahassee, where the corporation Lucky Lady Incorporated owned the vessel. And the corporation said, yeah, thanks a lot. Mind your own business. Keep doing what you're doing. 2 weeks later, the same Marine Patrol officer stopped the same vessel, boarded her again, said, "Where's your registration?" Captain Fred Jones said, "Ain't got one." Marine Patrol officer then arrested him, did not take him into custody, thank God, but gave him an appearance ticket, a notice to appear. Now you might think, oh well, it's like a speeding ticket. Well, yes and no, because this notice to appear was notice to appear for a second-degree misdemeanor. A second-degree misdemeanor is a crime. It's not just a traffic violation. So now the stakes are sort of edging up. Well, Captain Jones reported this situation to his employers, and they sent a lawyer from Tallahassee down the 400, 500, 600 miles, whatever it is, down to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to represent somebody, let's say Captain Jones, in a jury trial for a misdemeanor. And the jury was out for however long they were out. They came back and said, guilty. He doesn't have a registration. There's nothing to discuss. And so the judge was going to impose a fine, and the lawyer said something like, millions for defense, but not 1 cent for tribute. I don't know, Stephen Decatur or somebody said that, but anyway, let's assume he said that. And he said, we are going to appeal. And that appeal came to our office, our regional office in West Palm Beach, Florida, where I was on duty, and you know the story. Oh, this has something to do with boats? Give it to Tringali. He's a commodore or captain or whatever the heck he is, he must know about it. And so my name was put in as the attorney representing the state of Florida, and by I got a brief from a law firm at the state capitol that went on for pages and pages and pages and talked about international law and the Jones Act. The Jones Act is special federal law that deals with maritime law. Our office didn't even have books about the Jones Act. I had my personal set, which I had bought several years previously. But anyway, this was a complicated brief. And essentially, the argument was this boat doesn't need to be registered in Florida. Now, the Florida law says if you are in Florida permanently, you have 30 days to register your vessel. Okay? If you don't, it's a misdemeanor. The corporation argued the boat's not in Florida for 30 days. The boat stays at the Jolly Roger, but every day it leaves Florida and it goes out into the international waters where the federal law, the Jones Act, and all this other stuff applies, and blah, blah, blah. And I responded with, a usual 10-page brief saying, come on, can we get real? Okay, we know what's going on. Well, eventually the case was set for oral argument. The lawyer came back down from the state capitol, and he presented this argument that I just told you about. This boat's not in Florida. The boat's in international waters. The boat just happens to be here every night. And one of the judges at the Court of Appeal, Judge Robert Gross, I had known Bob since our years in the state attorney's office together in 1976, 77, whenever. And he was always a very level-headed guy. And on this particular day, he showed it because he interrupted this very esoteric argument. And he said, listen, can I ask you a question? Let's say this boat was a horse. And let's call the horse Maggie. Where does Maggie live? And this big shot lawyer said, oh, well, it's not the same. I understand that, but, Maggie's got to live someplace. Maggie eats oats. Maggie sleeps somewhere. So where does Maggie live? Well, this is about, but look, where does the boat get its fuel? Where does it tie up? And eventually the lawyer had to concede, well, it's at the Jolly Roger. Okay. I won that argument. I think actually Bob Gross won it, but my name's on the opinion. And Captain Fred Jones was convicted of a misdemeanor. Now here's the point. Here's what I want you to learn. understand, rather. First of all, what you need to understand is if you're bringing a boat into Florida, you have 30 days to register that boat. If you're bringing it in for a purpose other than to be here, just to say travel through to the Bahamas or keep it for sale or something like that, you have 90 days. But if Maggie is going to live here, then Maggie needs to be registered within 30 days. That's the simple answer. The larger answer, the more important lesson, the takeaway, if you will, is this. If you ever find yourself in this kind of situation, in a legal head-to-head contest, don't ever allow yourself to get into a position where somebody is saying, let's you and him fight. Because the loser is either going to be you or him. In this particular case, as we were walking out of the appellate court, I said to this lawyer, how much does the registration fee for this boat cost? And he said, $150. And I said, what? $150? You came down from Tallahassee to Fort Lauderdale for a jury trial, and you went back, you came back down for an appeal for $150? What the hell is going on here? And he said, well, you got to understand this boat is owned by a company that owns a number of gambling enterprises. And they are very, very sensitive about the state trying to exert any sort of registration or control over anything to do with gambling. And so they were going to make this into a test case. Okay. Joe Tringali gets his name on another opinion, wins another case. Lucky Lady Inc. pays some kind of fine. How about Captain Fred Jones? He's the guy that's stuck with a misdemeanor. I don't know if that affected his Coast Guard license or not. Perhaps it did. I hope it did not. But that's the takeaway. Don't become a pawn in somebody else's fight. Don't get into let's you and him fight. Because the loser in that case is going to be you or him. It's not going to be the guy who sits back someplace and says, oh, that's interesting. When you're going into court, if it ever gets to that point, make sure you have a lawyer there who is representing you. You want somebody representing you. Okay? Take that with you. Joe Tringali, Academy of Yachting, going in to have dinner with my daughter at this very lovely place, and we'll see you next time right here from the Academy of Yachting.